guitar compared to a solid electric is, you know, center hollow. And so the way it makes noise is the vibrations from the strings are increased by making the top vibrate. So the whole deal is about trying to get the top to vibrate, to project sound and bounce sound off the back and get it to come out the hole. That's the name of the game. So some of the parts that we want to make sure that we are kind of hip to. If I take a stab at sort of trying to draw a guitar, let's see. This is kind of guitar shaped in a way.
I think that's pretty dark.
The really dark piece of wood here is called bridge. That really dark piece of wood, and I think on this one that's ebony, and sometimes it's different species. Ebony is popular, it's used a lot. It's dense, and it's a nice visual contrast with whatever lighter color top gets used. But ebony is real common for bridges. That's the bridge. So that's the piece. We're just going to draw a rectangle here, and that's the bridge. And this white piece here, sometimes it's bone, sometimes it's plastic. In some cases, on some guitars, it might even be aluminum or brass. But that white piece there, that is called the string nut.
These are bone, right, in the kits?
You know, I'm not 100% for sure.
Finally simulated.
Simulated. Man-made. Yeah,
there's some artificial
Yeah.
materials in my car.
So the distance from the string nut to this other white piece that sits on the bridge is called a saddle. And that distance from the saddle to the string nut is kind of what determines overall about the instrument. That's referred to as scale length. And it's the distance from the saddle to either any one of these frets, which are the metal bars, or the string nut that give you the ability to generate different frequencies and to be able to play notes. And then when you can play one or multiple notes at a time, although it was hardly at a tune, I'm sorry, it got knocked over. So between the hard surfaces, and you can get the string to vibrate, that's what generates the different notes. And those of you that have built electric guitars and have seen some of our other curricula, we've got an activity. There's actually a mathematical relationship on how all these frets are spaced to generate the tone. So really it's one math formula, and the only thing that changes is what is this master distance between the nut and the saddle referred to as scale length. So the metal bars are referred to as frets. We'll just draw a couple of them. I mentioned this previously. On the acoustic guitar, the objective is to get the top to vibrate and get the sound to emanate from the sound hole. So we've got the sound hole. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes there will be a piece that circles around the sound hole, referred to as a rosette. And it can be very highly ornate, or it can be rather simplistic. It can be wood, it could be any number of different kinds of materials, different plastics. And it's a combination of decorative as well as structural. It helps to reinforce that weaker area around the sound hole. Sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't. These actually have all got, I think all the tops have got a pretty decent rosette that's been installed in them. And then of course, the really dark piece of wood that's on the front of the neck is the fretboard. In this case, it also looks like it's a piece of ebony. Lots of different species of wood get used for making fretboards. The ebony fretboards with the slots in them, when we go to press the frets in ourselves, it accepts the fret wire very nicely. It's almost a satisfying kind of plunk. Kind of just feel like sit down and takes some seating.
In case you're wondering, this is sustainably harvested. I'll say more about it later, but you don't have to feel bad about this.
There's typically some sort of a thin veneer piece of wood that goes on this part here, and that dark piece of wood that you see, and if you look from the side, you can see the color difference. between the two pieces of wood. That thin piece is referred to as a head plate, and the lighter colored, thicker piece is the head stock. Sometimes called a peg head when you're dealing with acoustic guitars. But on the front, that's head plate. And then around the back is the headstock. There's a couple other terms, but I think you know, to throw 8 or 9 words up on the board and everything, just so we have kind of an idea what some of the pieces are, the major components of the instrument, can be helpful. And then inside, we can talk about a couple of the pieces that are inside. And we pass this around, and I don't know how many have ever looked inside an acoustic guitar before, or really, maybe you haven't, just haven't thought about what you saw, but really kind of take note of what's in there. There's a variety of structural bracing, and its function is twofold. It's to help withstand the string tension, because the 6 strings total have about 120 pounds or so of tension on them, and that wants to rip the bridge off the front of the guitar. And it wants to make the front of the guitar deform and for the bridge to roll over. The top of this is referred to as either just the top or in some cases a soundboard. And so the bracing in the top helps to reinforce it so that it maintains its shape and withstands string tension. And then there's also some bracing for the back as well to help maintain its rigidity and its shape. And if you really look at it, you'll notice neither the back nor the top are flat. This might be referred to as a flat top guitar because it's not a really curvy, carved kind of thing like a violin, but it's not really flat. It's actually a section of a dome on both sides. So let's go ahead and pass that around real quick and talk about just a couple of the terms. What we're going to work towards today is we want to glue up what's going to make the shape of the guitar. We get a lot of the parts from the Taylor Guitar Company in California. Have you ever heard of Taylor Guitars before? Okay, we've had the privilege of actually getting some FaceTime with Bob Taylor, who is the owner of the company. And Taylor employees have identified and worked with us on parts out of their inventory, their product lineup that they actually sell the STEM Guitar Project. And they actually furnish about 90 or 95% of the parts in this kit. Where the electric guitars, if you built electric guitars, those things are largely made at Sinclair Community College in-house by campus student workers, except for the economists. This, on the other hand, is all these parts are made by Taylor, and they sell them to us, except for the bracing and the smooth adjustment. With the exception of those 2 components, everything else is, yeah, have a good look inside and kind of like see where some of the structural pieces.
See it on the floor.
Yeah, you can pass. I don't mind passing this around. This might show better. I'll pass this around. That's some of the bracing that's inside. So we're going to work today to glue up pre-bent sides furnished to us by Taylor, cutting larger blocks of wood, running them through a sanding machine to make them very thin, and then using heat and steam to bend them is a very time-consuming process. And if we were going to make guitars from just some timbers, or even if we had the flat side pieces, just flat, to steam bend them, we would not be able to. This is one of several things that would prevent us from being able to finish in a week. So having pre-formed sides is a huge time saver. It's one of several things that helps us save time. It doesn't mean that it's a lower quality guitar. It doesn't mean that if you have more time with students and you have a year-long setting or a semester-long setting where you can have an extended period of time and meet for 3 hours a week or something at the college level, doesn't mean you couldn't bend some sides if you wanted to. But for our format, to get you through in the week to see the overall process, having these bent sides from Taylor is wonderful. It's a huge time saver and a big boost. Yes, sir.
I would say it's actually a little more compelling than that. These are production sides from Taylor. They didn't make them for us.
Right.
These go into their production guitars. I just bought a Taylor's L114. It was about an $800 guitar. It didn't have laminated back and sides, and I prefer them. I would rather have laminated ones than solid ones. These are more stable, they never crack, they never change shape. This is not, don't get the idea that you've got laminated back and sides and somehow that's lower quality.
Yeah, it's not plywood. It is not plywood.
It's not plywood. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not. It's not lumberyard plywood.
So very first thing that we want to do one of the early things that we're going to get done today is we're going to glue up what's referred to as a sub-assembly referred to as a rim. So this sub-assembly of the rim has the two sides, and then it has, collectively both of these pieces might be referred to as end blocks. This one back here all by itself, the heel block. And this one would be the neck block. That's one of the things that we want to get done today. I think 3 major tasks. Is it 3? It was 3 major tasks, and this is one of the 3 major tasks, is to get that glued and clamped up. And like I said, these sides are exactly the final shape. We don't have to trim or modify, do anything to these. We can take the blocks and we can glue everything up. This one piece might be a little long and we have to trim this, but with other than the exception of that, this stuff is all ready to go. And like Mark said, these are production parts. They didn't make anything special for us. The other thing that we want to do is there's a material called kerfing. It's got a triangular cross section, kind of like that, and it comes in longer strips, maybe 2 feet long, 1.5 feet long, like so. And it's got saw cuts in them at regularly spaced intervals, pretty close together, and the saw cuts are pretty narrow. And that kerfing, those strips get glued and placed on the interior surfaces of the rim. And for that guitar that's incomplete, that body that's incomplete, as it gets passed around, you can see where the kerfing has been glued in around the interior. So we do want to get the kerfing glued in on your rim. And it's real easy to work with. A lot of times it's made out of basswood, or in this case, we probably have mahogany. And the density is lower, and it's easy to work with, and it's just a matter of, I don't know about you guys, a lot of times I just snap it to the length that I need, and if it's splintered a little bit on the end, sand it a little bit, and just glue it in place, and they get held in the same closed pieces that kind of go around the perimeter. We'll demonstrate that. The other thing that we're going to take a look at, and we're probably going to start with first, like our very first thing, before we worry about the rim, is we have got all the bracing that you see in that partially completed sound box that has the rim and the top glued to it with all the kerfing in place. This is the bracing. Now, in traditional acoustic guitar making, I'm sure that this would be really frowned upon. The traditional method is you get tight grained, straight grained, quarter sawn, really high end Sitka spruce or another kind of spruce of equal quality that's got high stiffness and it's lightweight, so that it's not dampening the top unless the top is lightweight. And those pieces start out as rectangular sticks, and you have to impart a curvature to them because remember I said the top and the back actually are sections of the dome that are rounded. And then you notice also, besides me telling you that the top and the back are sections of the dome, I don't know whether it's over here. These things are not straight, but they're loaded full of curves, right? They got catenary curves like the suspension bridge. Well, again, in traditional lutherie, those things would be individually carved with chisels and sort of shaped, and after they've been glued onto the top, chiseled and shaped a little bit more, guys that know what they're doing, they'll kind of listen and tap a little bit and then decide they're going to shape a little bit of wood here or there, kind of thing. In order to get us through a week-long workshop, having the bracing laser cut out of Baltic birch 3mm plywood lets us get through this in a way that simply wouldn't be possible in a week-long format. Everything is labeled, everything goes together with tabs and slots. I came up with an early version that had some bugs in it that we worked around on workshops we did in 2019. And Bill, thank you very, very much for all the hours that you put in on taking my mess and cleaning it up and getting it to the point where it doesn't need anywhere near the modification that we had to do. I mean, this just dropped. This is Bill's version, and it just dropped together.
So, if you don't mind, let me explain something. We're doing our acoustic program in conjunction with the bluegrass program here at ETSU. So, all of my work was motivated by fear. Because if we wanna have students build guitars that they could play in performance, in recording, and, my goal is to have one of them be the first to appear on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry with one of these. And, to do that, you have to have reliable tooling, because I teach manufacturing. So that's why I've spent the time to get it and get it right, so that they have every excuse to build a good guitar, whether they do or not. But that's the whole thing that's done. This right here is trying to make sure this is a good professional guitar, even though it's made out of, you know, laser cut plywood, which you know of anybody that does that for real,
Nope, I mean,
commercially?
nobody does it in the industry. Not plywood. I've seen some laser cut bracing on some real high antique stuff, just as a matter of showing. But,
But yeah, the bottom line is, these are actually good guitars. They should sound good if you take your time and
work the steps.
yeah, just follow the process. I think it'll come together for everybody.
So, on your own time, thank you for that, Bill. On your own time, you might think about looking up guitar bracing. There are lots of ways to brace the internal structure on a guitar. Probably the single most popular method of doing it is what's referred to as an X-brace. A big mystery about why that might be called an X-brace, right? So, and when you talk about modern guitar building, Martin Guitars in Pennsylvania seems to be the touchstone, because they are the oldest company in continuous operation making acoustic guitars. They developed the X-bracing sometime in the 19th century, and it was one of several bracing patterns that they had. Another common bracing pattern is called a ladder, and it looks a lot like what goes in the back, where it's just parallel bars. When the shift in guitars in the 1920s was from like gut strings to steel strings, the instruments were not designed for all that tension, and people wanted to put steel strings on their guitars. And Martin sort of led the path with redesigning the bracing on their guitars, and they went back and they had dusted off this, oh, we've got this X bracing pattern. That they built it, they used it, but it never really took off. And they found that, you know, this is working well for us with the steel string guitars. And they kind of overhaul, in a period of a couple years time in the late 20s, early 30s, they overhauled their entire product line to be able to have X bracing and withstand the extra tension of steel strings. And it's been universally copied by everybody. Just about any acoustic guitar you open up is probably going to have X bracing. Only recently has Taylor made a big deal about putting in their own bracing that they call V-class, which is really just a variant on ladder bracing. And so there's not any one particular way to do this. I know Bill's kicking the tires on an alternate plan for bracing that's not an X-brace, but because all the pieces are labeled, everything's tab and slot, it makes it very easy. Parts only are supposed to fit one way. So what you can put together in an hour's time will save you, as a novice, will save you almost a week worth of work. You know, and you'll be able to put that together today. So that's really our big emphasis, is we want to get the bracing glued on the back first. And we're going to do a demo and show how to lay out a center line and locate and arrange the bracing for the back. We want to get that glued on the back. We want to get the bracing glued on the top, and we want to glue up the rim and put the kerfing in. Now, I don't know how you guys took wood shop when you were in junior high, or, you know, if you're a tech ed teacher like Matt and I and a couple other folks in the room. And I know what I heard as a student, the mantra was, you clamp it and let it glue overnight. And then I worked in a cabinet shop for a couple summers. And they looked at me and said, we would never make any money if we had to clamp stuff and let it sit overnight. 45 minutes. Half hour if we're in a real hurry, and it's not too deep. 45 minutes, that's it. After 45 minutes, we're losing money. So, with that in mind, I can tell you, almost every single process, including the scary one, gluing the bridge on the front, I timed it. And other than, I think there was some bracing on the back that was like 5:30, and I had to go home. And that got left overnight, but it wasn't intentional. Everything else, I was very intentional about marking out 45 minutes, making sure that after 45 minutes the clients came up. And this started 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And I seriously did. The first 3 months after I built this, I didn't know this was gonna work. Nobody does plywood cut bracing glued together. Mark is the expert here. He literally wrote a book, several books about guitars. And he's like, I don't know. And I kept waiting to come in the morning and see that this thing had exploded overnight. You know, shards of wood, the neck bent forward and flopping, and all the string tension slack. And it hasn't happened. There's the book. Yeah.
There's one of them, that's
One.
This is the one that,
that's the first one.
So,
and if you order it by Amazon this week and count it in, you
Okay,
gotta
let me-
sign it.
Let me give you a better deal. I've got PDFs of both my guitar books if you want them.